Hello and welcome to the Everyday Adventure podcast. My name is Nikki Bass and I'm a business psychologist, army veteran and everyday adventurer. I will be sharing my conversations with some truly incredible guests who are weaving adventure into their daily lives. And I really hope that these conversations inspire you to undertake your own everyday adventures too. So welcome back to the Everyday Adventure podcast. And we are coming to the end of season 7, which I cannot quite believe because I sort of feel like I've only just got started with it. But anyway, today I am really excited because I think this interview is pretty timely and you'll see why as we go through. But today I'm very excited to welcome Kerenza Bryson to the show. Kerenza is a professional athlete who represents Great Britain in the modern pentathlon. And if you're not sure what the modern pentathlon involves, because I wasn't either, thankfully, Kerenza has enlightened me. But also, if you've been watching the Olympics recently, you may well have a better idea as well. So it includes epee fencing, swimming, so freestyle swimming, equestrian show jumping, and a combined laser run, which is pistol shooting and cross-country running. So Kerenza has won gold, silver and bronze medal in the World and European Championships. And she recently competed at the Paris Olympics where she came 9th in the final. And in the semi-final, she also got a new Olympic record. So incredibly impressive just reading through that. But if that wasn't enough, she is also a qualified doctor and also an officer in the British Army Reserve. So I was just speaking to Kerenza before we started to record, and I said, having just read her bio, I felt like I needed to go for a bit of a lie down and a cup of tea. So I'm so excited to get to understand more about how she even manages to juggle all those different roles that she has. I have her wonderful commanding officer, Georgina Simmons, to thank. So Lieutenant Colonel Georgina Simmons of 165 Port and Maritime Regiment RLC. Georgina and I were at Sandhurst together many years ago. So I was so thrilled when she reached out and suggested I meet Kerenza and have a chat with her. And also I am super excited. I know I keep using that word, but as somebody who was absolutely glued to their TV screen in proper sofa surfer mode over the Paris Olympics and became quite an expert, it has to be said, in all sorts of sports, ranging from BMX cross to I think even kayak cross, I think I was quite good at commentating on and arguing with the judges. So it was such a highlight of the summer. And I know it was such a highlight for so many people I know, people who were lucky enough to get to Paris to go and watch the events, or even if you were sat on your sofa like me and cheering along from the sidelines, that this just feels a really wonderful way to finish off this season as well. So Kerenza, welcome to the show. It is such a pleasure to have you here.
Hi, Nikki. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
So I'd love to get started. I mean, obviously, there's a huge amount we could cover during this podcast, and I'm sure I will run out of time in speaking to you. But I think the first thing I wanted to just touch on is I think one of the things that I mentioned briefly when we were just chatting before is there's something about when we're watching sporting events, and particularly with the Olympics, what we're seeing is, I guess, the pinnacle of so much work and so much effort that has gone and that has gone into getting to that point, and we're seeing the sort of the end result. But I think there's also something that we can be, and whilst that, for most people, we're not going to get to be Olympic athletes, so we're not going to be on the other side of the spectator stands. But I think there's something that all of us can gain from sort of understanding that journey and that determination and the work that goes into it. Because often one of the things I say on the show is, we tend to go, oh, I could never do that thing because it seems so huge. But actually, when we focus on those small steps, suddenly we find ourselves in a place we never imagined. And I just wondered if you could share a little bit more about your background and how you got to that point where you were competing at the Paris Olympics, knowing there's probably a huge amount in that.
Yeah, no, you are right. The Olympics are the absolute pinnacle of our sport and many people's sport. And that's kind of like the major goal that people have. And it only comes around once every 4 years, which is the tough part because we get European and World Championships every single year. So it's about trying to pull it together on that day. But it is the absolute tip of the iceberg. And everyone watching on the TV, it's amazing that the Olympics does so much to inspire people. But that is the only bit you see, that performance on that day. And that might be, 30 seconds of a race if that's all you do, or for me it's like an entire 3 days of competing to get to the end point. But it's the stuff in the background that gets you there, and when you're competing you're just relying on all that practice and all that training, and all the hard work is done. You've just got to pull it together. So a bit about me. I am from Plymouth. I'm in the Army Reserves, as you said, which is 165 Porter Maritime Regiment, who've been extremely supportive of this whole journey. And I'm also a qualified doctor and studied in Plymouth as well. As that's where I'm from, it was easier to keep everything down there with the support network that I already had set up and my family. And I decided that I wanted to go to the Olympics when I was 10 or 11 years old. And I pinpointed Paris when I was 11, that I thought realistically, based on the age of athletes that I had watched, like around the Olympics that time. And I went and watched the London 2012 games and was extremely inspired by that. Paris was going to be the one that I was going to aim for. And I also did try for Tokyo, but given that I was halfway through my medical degree, COVID meant that it was all delayed by a year to 2021. It was just unachievable at that time. So it's been a very long goal in the grand scheme of things. So that's 14 years that I've been working towards that. And I've not just been a full-time athlete, I've done medical school and Army Reserve stuff. So it's been really tough. To be completely honest with you, there's been some really big kind of lows and really challenging periods of time when you've got massive medical school exams and you're thinking, am I doing enough work? Am I going to pass my exams? I don't want to resit a year, but I also don't want to give up on this dream of the games. And there's things like injury as well. I've been lucky that I've not had any huge injuries, but I've still had some injuries where you're thinking, can I work through this? Can I do the prehab that is needed to get back on track? And especially if you miss big competitions, you don't then have the results to prove that you're worthy of being selected for the next year. So yeah, it's been a long journey. And yeah, as you say, the Olympics are amazing, how they bring everyone together and how they inspire people. And I love that part of it, that you know that there are kids watching back at home that are going, I saw Kerenza doing that, maybe I can do that as well. And they learn to pick up a sport like pentathlon, which you don't have at school. And yeah, no, I think it's amazing that it does that.
So interesting, isn't it? I remember, I think I said to you before that I had this conversation with my son, I can't quite remember what I'd been watching that afternoon, or what had been on the Olympics. I think it was about 3 or 4 days into the Olympics. And I was just like, I think it just struck me that huge breadth of sport that's on display. And he's a very talented footballer. He's lucky in the sense that, for a 13-year-old boy at school, he can easily, he's in the teams for all the standard sports, rugby and football and cricket and all the rest of it. But I just also said to him, I said, it's so interesting, isn't it, how there are all these incredible athletes out there in sports that half the time we've never even heard of, or they're not the sort of sports that are televised necessarily, or they don't come across our radar, and yet there's so much opportunity that we're not aware of. And that actually for kids who are in school and don't fit that sort of standard mold of you are a sporty kid, it's sort of, how do we not get that part of them shut down in a way? How do we continue to say, actually there are so many other things that you can do, and not to say that all kids should be Olympic athletes, but that actually you can all find something that you're interested in and that engages you. And I think that's one of the beauties of the Olympics, is it does just showcase so many sports as well. So you mentioned about, obviously that there have been some pretty tough moments and, challenges in getting there. I guess, what has been, I suppose, the biggest challenge you've faced to date? And I guess also, what is it that you feel has enabled you to sort of navigate through that? I mean, do you have any particular tools that you use, or anything that you think, actually, that's something that I rely on when things do get really tricky?
Yeah, so I'd say one of the things so far has really been the selection for this Olympics. It's been really tough because we have such a strong female squad. So we started this year with 6 girls who were all in contention for 2 Olympic spots. So, and we're all friends. We all get along really well. We're all teammates. So I've been a full-time athlete for 1 year into the games. So I paused my medical career, which has been amazing, completely life-changing in the time that I've had, not only to train a bit more, but also to focus on recovery. So for the last 2 years, really, where the selection period has been opened, because it's 2 years into Paris, it's just been a bit of a fight for those 2 spots. And it's really hard when you've got your team around you. Although pentathlon is an individual sport, we are a team. We all train together as one unit. And it is really tough when you know that you're all being very competitive with each other, not just in the competition environment, but it starts to filter into the training environment when you know that really only 2 of you are going to the games in August. And I wasn't the first to qualify for Paris either, where all year I'd been the top Brit competing, but then the first opportunity to qualify, I didn't qualify, and my best friend actually qualified, which is great because you're really happy for them. But also, it's one less opportunity to qualify, and it does add that extra element of pressure. So I'd say that's been really tough, like bringing that super brutal, competitive kind of situation into a team that is really quite close, works really well together, and we see each other day in, day out. We share rooms together when we're abroad at competitions and training camps, and kind of how that's affected the dynamic, which is interesting because really the last year into the games has been, well, should have been one of the smoothest years I've had, given that it's the only year where I've pretty much just focused on sport. And the Army's been really supportive in allowing me to drop back on my commitments and responsibilities there slightly to train more. Medicine side of it were happy for me to completely pause it. But kind of psychologically, I think that last year has been the hardest.
Gosh, yeah, I was just thinking, one of the things that people often say on the podcast when I ask them, what's the one thing you sort of advise if people want to get started in their adventure? And often people will talk about the sense of community that they've gained, or the connections and the support that they have from participating, whether it's in a sport or an adventure or whatever it is. And I was just thinking what you were saying about that sort of that challenge in the end, that I imagine when you're so focused that actually you're so reliant on the support of people around you and of those close relationships, and then at the same time them being so tested because
Yeah,
you are also competitors and you're also fighting for those spots. And I was just thinking how that must be very, very challenging, trying to navigate
yeah.
that space. And maybe there's an element of relief once the Olympics are done, that you're like, actually you can get back to a slightly less as you say, brutal environment where,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's true. And you're meeting up with your teammates after that. Some of them you feel like you've been slightly estranged from for a good few months. And then, I mean, I've met a friend recently and it kind of goes back to how it was before. And that's really lovely. But that is the slightly negative side of elite sport that you don't see as
Mm.
much really, or you don't know about. But also for me, because I'd been a satellite athlete for so many years in Plymouth as the only satellite athlete on the program. So everyone trains in Bath. Everyone else has been a team and together for years and years. And some of them have been training in Bath for more than a decade. And I've pretty much been doing it on my own down in Plymouth with my own coaches, joining separate squads for different sports, but doing it pretty much alone, not having that connection as much as you mentioned. So for me, coming to Bath, that was one of the biggest things that I thought was amazing, and that I'd really felt like I was missing from my sporting career when I was training at home. So it was a bit of a mix. I felt like I got it for a few months through the winter, but then also it was kind of sliding away, and I felt like I was trying to keep everyone in a community, but you also had that dynamic that I speak of. And Paris is everyone's dream and everybody wants it just as much as the other athletes. So it is tough, and you can understand it.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's so interesting, the point you make as well, as this is the side of things that doesn't often get discussed as well. Actually, not just what you're sacrificing. I think people tend to think about it in terms of sacrificing, hey, well, you're not so much having a social life, or you you have to become very single focused, or you're having to really do a lot of training. But like you said, that aspect in terms of relationships and connection, I can imagine must take a while to navigate. I mean, when you so obviously you're still competing and you still got things to look forward to, but when you think about, I guess, your journey to date with professional sport, but also in terms of how you've navigated that with your career outside with training to become a doctor, which is also in itself almost an elite sport, I think, sometimes, from the people I know who've been through medical training. Gosh. What if there's the obvious benefits, I would imagine, that people think of, okay, when you get to the Olympics, that's just an incredible achievement in itself. And, obviously, I guess the fitness and health benefits you get from training. But in terms of what you personally have gained from not just, I guess, competing professionally, but in managing all of these different aspects of your life, I mean, what are some of the benefits that you would say?
I think some of the obvious ones that I'm sure a lot of people say, but it is very true. There's things like organization skills and time management, because I've been doing pentathlon since I was 12 years old. So it's not just, balancing it with medical school. I've been doing this since I started kind of year 8, year 9, through GCSEs, through A level. And I have had to work out and learn through trial and error, and just figuring out how to do it without anyone in my year at school who was doing a similar thing or had exactly the same ambitions that I did, which was a real process and a real learning curve from quite a young age. And working out, okay, so if I do this training here, I miss that block that I can revise for that, where I can do my homework for the next day. Therefore, I'm going to have to do it in the car on the way in, and just be really clever with the time I had. And I didn't appreciate it at the time, obviously, because I was a teenager. But as I grew up and went through medical school, I was using little bits of 20 minutes here and there and being really productive, because I couldn't afford to procrastinate. And it is interesting, because as soon as I have a bit more time, I do start procrastinating and I start wasting time and being less efficient. And I think a lot of it is, if you make yourself do that and you fill all those gaps and you give yourself tons to do in that day that you have 12 hours, you do, just through trial and error. It doesn't happen in a day, but you work out how to make it work and make it happen. And I think because I did that at such a young age of 11 or 12, I've been able to take those skills through my life without really realizing I had them, until I was kind of looking at my medical school friends and they were going, oh my God, how do you fit all of that in? And you kind of think, oh, I don't really know. This is just how I live. This is my lifestyle. I'm super busy. I like it like this. I fit everything in. Yes, it's really stressful, but I'd often find that if I didn't do that, then I would just drop some of the balls. And if you want to juggle all those balls, you have to do something to make it work. So, for instance, when I was studying for medical school exams and I didn't have time to revise as much as I should be, I was listening to podcasts, which were medical education things, when I was running, in the car, all those little dead spaces. I would take meetings when I was driving and only be able to do them when I was driving, because I didn't have any time to fit them in. And when we'd go to competitions abroad, I'd have to revise, obviously, because there was a few times where I'd get back and have an exam the next day. So I'd be doing my flashcards and everything on the plane. So yeah, a massive thing is organization and time management that I've kind of taken from sport and bringing into different parts of my life, including the army. I'm aware that a lot of people probably say that, but I do really think that those two are really, really relevant. And also things like team working. Even though I said that pentathlon is a individual sport, it's still so relevant in every other aspect in normal working careers.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking, and it's entirely unrelated in some ways, because obviously, if you think about what it is you were juggling with, with having all these multiple strands, and like you said, using those pockets of time, it reminded me of so when I was so my first son had just been born, and I had my finals for was doing an Open University psychology degree, and I had my exam, I think, about 5 weeks after he was born. And I remember just this thing of being sort of, like you said, just not. There was a bit of me that was going, actually, I don't know how I'm going to do this because I haven't got time to, I'd done a bit of revision prior to that, and I'd be lucky enough that, I'd had a little bit of maternity leave beforehand, but he came a bit earlier than we thought. And just that sort of going, okay, I've got 20 minutes here, I've got 30 minutes here, or I've got 5 minutes here that I can just cram in, or using record cards, whatever. And I was just thinking it's such an interesting discipline to develop, because it does hide, and as someone who's equally guilty of using, when I have long stretches of time, just going, I've got plenty, I'm not going to do anything. It's interesting what you can do with those small pockets. But I was just thinking as well that one of the reasons we often give, and myself included, for not taking up something or trying something new, or going on an adventure, whatever it might be, is, I haven't got the time. And I think what you've just illustrated is actually and it's easy to say, but actually in reality, I think it's quite hard to get into that mindset of, well, what am I prioritizing? Because actually maybe what I am prioritizing is I just need time to lie on my bed and stare at the ceiling. That's fine. But actually know that I'm making a conscious decision to put my effort somewhere or somewhere else, or what am I doing with those pockets too? And that's not to undermine people who genuinely have so many other pulls on their time that they don't have it. But I think it's just about how actually when you really want to achieve something, that it's how you find those moments that are available to you as well.
Yeah, and you do have to make those sacrifices of, if you really, really want to achieve something and you're serious about it, and you don't have time, because a lot of people don't have time, especially parents that are running kids around. I mean, I've not had to experience that yet, but I'm hopefully will, and that'll be another challenge. But if you're genuinely serious about it, you have to sacrifice something in order to be able to do that's something new that you want to try. And that's totally fine, because you can always do it for set amounts of time and then come back to something else, and there's different periods in your life with different things to focus on. But it might be that that 1 hour in the evening when you end up scrolling on Instagram and feel like you've had a fun time, but you've not really achieved anything from that. It might be that you have to limit screen time, and then you suddenly realize that you've got a lot more time to read that book and become an expert on something that you wanted to, or go and join a club that's in the evening, or whatever it might be.
I was just, as you was talking, I was just thinking, it's that thing that we tend to think there's some sort of magic involved. And I think particularly around an event like the Olympics, or any sort of big event that we see, and somebody's, out there on that stage, that actually, somehow there's been a sort of a wand that's been waved to allow them to be in that position. And I think, what you've just illustrated is actually just the hard graft, and the sort of the choices that have gone in to being there, and how you can make it work without necessarily having a big gift of, okay, so I'm a professional athlete and I'll just sit here and everything will come to me. Actually, no, I made those choices along the way because this is what I've wanted, and I've carved out those moments where I've needed to. I can imagine coming back from something like the Olympics, there's probably, and not wanting to take away your recovery time, because I'm sure that's much needed as well. I can imagine there's probably quite an interesting transition that you then have to make. And I suppose that probably depends on what your sport is and what your life is like outside, as to how you sort of then focus forward. But I guess for you, what are the next steps? What's next now? Having achieved this ambition that you've held for so many years of the Paris Olympics, what would you like to do with that next?
Yeah, so it is a really strange one, because as I said, it's been my dream for 14 years. It's pretty much been in my diary. I've had like a big 10-year plan. And now I'm at the end of that plan. I'm like, oh my goodness, what do I do now? And the Olympics was over like that, and I never really thought I properly understood what people said when they were saying I'm on cloud nine. I feel like I'm in a dream, and I really experienced that in the games, because it is like nothing else, and being cheered on by 15,000-20,000 people, and the whole experience of it and the community within Team GB is just amazing. And then you suddenly get back and you're a normal person again. You're not getting people asking for autographs on the street. You're not getting people asking for photos, which you get a lot when you're going around in your Team GB kit. And you do get a bit of an Olympic down. You're like, a lot of people do get depressed, and I can really see why. It's really tough, especially when you don't get the result you wanted. So I was going to the games for a medal. I'd achieved quite a lot of medals and stuff that season. I'd won a World Cup and one European Championship. So I was really going into it thinking that I was going to walk away with a medal. So to add into that, coming home and feeling really quite upset and broken by not getting the result I wanted after this being a 14-year plan was really tough. It was really hard. And for me now, I've got this added thing of I've paused medicine for a year, but I can't pause it for any longer. So I know I need to start working as a doctor in December. So it's like I don't really now feel ready to move on from my sport career, having not quite achieved what I wanted, and have dedicated so much of my life to it. I was almost ready to, if I had got a medal at Paris, to close that chapter of professional sport and try something else. I mean, I've really wanted to try triathlons for a while, and just do sport a bit more for fun on an amateur level around being a doctor and kind of shifting my focus to military and medicine a bit more. But given that I didn't achieve anywhere near what I wanted to, and I don't think it's a good representation of me as an athlete and what I can do, I have now kind of set my sights on LA 28, and I would like to go to another Olympics. And just now I'm in this period of trying to work out how I'm going to do that, because it's one thing doing medical school, which is really tough, and doing 4 or 5 hours of training a day around that, as well as doing some Army Reserve stuff. But it's a totally different ballgame actually being an NHS junior doctor and then trying to do Army Reserve stuff and trying to train for an Olympics, because the commitments that you need as a junior doctor are a lot more, and the shift patterns. And for me, one of the biggest things I always say is, people say, how have you carried on doing this for 6 years of medical school? It's just routine. Being able to say that every Monday, I know I swim 6 till 8 in the morning, I go to medical school, I then go for a run, I have dinner, I then go fencing, and then I get back home. Having that routine is, you just wake up and you know, this is what I do. I've done this for years, I'm just going to do it again. But when I'm a junior doctor, there's going to be night shift, there's going to be twilight shifts, there's going to be early shifts, and it's just going to be flipping your circadian rhythm a lot. I'm going to have to learn a new way of training around the job. And that's going to be an interesting challenge for me. I think that's probably going to be the biggest challenge I've got coming up now. But as we've already said, I am now hungry for an Olympic medal. I know this is what I want. And if I'm going to go to another games, I need to make it work. So I'm going to have to, through trial and error of something new, work out how to make it work.
Gosh, I think the first thing I just want to say is thank you for your honesty as well, because I think, again, you know, that sense that, you know, you see it when, obviously at a distance from watching on the screen, that when people don't achieve what they know they're capable of, or they've set out to achieve, and you sort of feel, you know, I can imagine there is a sort of pressure from a performance or from a, you know, a story angle that, okay, we want this person just to be okay, that's fine, and I'm happy with that, or that's, you know, to be sort of this idea of being gracious in defeat. And I think whilst you can be gracious, at the same time there is a real honesty in going, but actually I'm not happy with what happened, or I'm not happy with that outcome, and that's fired me up to do something else, and that we could admit that to them ourselves. And I think particularly for women, there's a real pressure that comes with that. How openly can you be competitive and express that as well?
Show that anger. Like,
Yeah,
I was furious. I was
yeah.
furious, and the amount of people that came up and said, but you're an Olympian, that's amazing. And I totally get that, and I am happy with that. But I can also feel the other emotion of, I'm so angry and upset and devastated that I didn't achieve what I knew I was capable of on a good day. And as you say, yeah, I feel like men are allowed to express that a bit more than we are. So it is tough. It's tough to kind of hide that from the media a bit, but also want to be honest and show that, we can feel this too. And it's totally okay. You've got to grieve it because it is like losing something.
No, absolutely. And how healthy it is to be able to recognize that and vocalize it as well. I think, so many challenges I know and I see with teenage girls as well is about that having to push down those emotions to go, oh no, it's fine. And I'm so grateful and I'm so happy and I'm so lucky that was able to do this. And actually to be able to openly go, do you know what? I am those things, but I've also two things can be true. And I am also
Yeah.
I'm hungry for more and I know that I'm capable and I want to push myself and I know I can compete. I think that's such an important message. So if somebody is listening to this and they're either 11 years old and thinking, I want to make, I don't know what the Olympics is in, let's say, LA or whatever the next Olympics is. And they're thinking, yeah, I want to get there. Or they're sat there like me, having seen these incredible performances, but also just gone, oh, that looks like a really fun sport. I'd love to give that a go. But aren't quite sure how to get started. I mean, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them?
It's just about getting started and trying it, because getting there to that first day of that session of something new is the biggest hurdle. And once you've done it once, you might absolutely fall in love with that sport, and then you will have that drive and that ambition to make time for it, as we were speaking about earlier. A lot of it when you're a kid is about having really supportive parents that give you those opportunities. And I'm extremely lucky and very, very thankful that my parents were amazing and I had an awesome childhood. And they said, do you want to try it? We'll make it work. You try that, then whatever, we'll give it a go. And that's kind of how I got into pentathlon, because it is really tough to get into. And as a kid, I got very bored very easily and wanted to do every single sport under the sun. And I was very lucky that my parents said, sure, but we'll do different sports every single day. We'll drive you there. And that is a huge thing. So I would say to parents, give your kids opportunities to try something out. Let them watch the games and say, hey, I want to try kayaking. Let's go try kayaking. And you never know, they might be the next Olympian. That is a huge thing that that I believe in. But more so for adults as well, just getting there and trying it out. And everyone's got a passion. You just need to find that. And as you say, with sport, if you're not good at running, that doesn't mean that you're physically not fit for all sports. You might be an amazing technical athlete. You might have a great eye and be amazing at archery. So just go take it up. And it doesn't matter if you don't make it to the game. Sport isn't about performance all the time. Sport is about bringing everyone together. It's about connection and community, finding a group of people that can support each other and having fun and enjoying sport. And I'm hoping that after the games and after my sport career, I'm not going to be one of those athletes that's like, I can't wait to completely close this chapter. I'm never getting in the pool again. I'm never going to run again. Because you do see people like that. I'm really hopeful that I can say, okay, I'm closing this professional sport chapter where I have to do it because it's work and I'm paid to do this, and change my perspective on sport into, this is fun. I get a lot of enjoyment out of this. I connect with a lot of different people. And yeah, just really kind of see the other side of sport that I haven't really seen for a while, quite to that extent. So yeah, just go to that park run, go and do that camping weekend, and yeah, and try your best to make time for it, because it might be something that you absolutely fall in love with and is really good for your health and well-being.
I love that. I have to confess also to being one of those parents that every time my kid takes up a new sport goes, oh yeah, they're going to be brilliant. I'm waiting for this.
Yeah.
And then like, 6 months in, they're going, I don't like it. Don't want to get out of bed. And I'm just like, oh
Yeah.
no. Or you see them gradually, their peers just accelerate. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, so that it's not going to be that one, is it?
Yeah. And it's
But
tough because there's a lot of changing. Like if they do
yeah.
diving for 6 months and they're actually super inflexible and not good at, I'm not an expert on diving, but not good at the technical aspects of that, then that's fine. If they love it, then that's great. But if they really want to get to the games and something, then it's being able to then say, okay, what else can we try? Yeah, and it is hard because I'm not a parent, but I know from watching my parents, you take up so much of their time when you're trying to do all these different sports, and you're like, Mum, I want to get to the Olympics. Let's try and find what to do. It's really hard.
No, but I think it's also one of the great delights as well. I mean, you can quote me on this one. I am standing on the 15 billionth football pitch but in December, being absolutely
Yeah.
rained on. But I think there is something also deeply, energizing about watching your child take up something and get such great enjoyment from it. And I think that's also what I find is really interesting, is also using that as motivation for yourself too.
Yes.
I know whenever I've tried a new sport, I mean, I banged on about this enough on the podcast, but about a couple of years ago, I started netball again after a very, very, very long break and having not been very good in the first place. But I think to your point about the sense of the community and just the pure fun and going, actually, one, and having seen my son enjoy his football and enjoy being part of a team so much, and then going, actually, I miss that. I miss being part of a team. And I want to do it for that purpose. And actually, it does bring you so much joy. So I think that's such wonderful advice. Kerenza, it has been such an absolute pleasure. I could have kept this going for a long time because I'm very nosy and I've got a lot more questions I'd like to ask you, but I know you've got to get back to one of your many jobs. So if people want to find out more about you, about your Olympic journey, about any of the work that you do, where can they go?
So the best place is probably my Instagram. I'm not good at doing all the social media as I don't have a lot of time. But yeah, Instagram's the best, Kerenza.Bryson. And I try and post as much as I can on there and keep everyone up to date with what's going on. And my LinkedIn as well. I try and keep that up to date as well. But yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I'll pop those links in the show notes as well, so people can go and follow you and not put any pressure on you to do more social media, because it does sound like you've got quite a lot going on. But
It's hard.
it's so
It's hard trying to post like every other day.
Oh my God, it's brutal. Honestly, I have weeks where I just go with nothing. And then I'm like, oh no, I really should do something, particularly with this
Yeah.
podcast. So I can, and that's without all that stuff going on. So, but I just wanted to say very, very best of luck with whatever comes next, and for LA in 2028 as well. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me and to share your story with everyone. It's been such a pleasure to speak to you and to meet you as well.
No, thank you so much for having me on. It's been really awesome.
Take care. Bye. So, an enormous thank you to Kerenza for coming on the podcast and for being such a timely guest. I couldn't have planned this. I feel like this has been the season of timely guests, whether it was Johnny Ball with the elections and now Kerenza. I feel like if I'd sat down and written a strategy from this season and I was one of those people, that's what it would have looked like. And actually, serendipity has just meant that I have had the right guest appear at the right time. And I am very, very happy about that. So I hope you are too. I just wanted to pick up on something from following on from my discussion with Kerenza. Obviously, there's so many different aspects that I could follow up on. And I had so many more questions I wanted to ask her about the Olympics, honestly. But for the risk of becoming too fangirly, I thought I probably should rein it in. However, we had quite an interesting discussion once we finished, which I'm sorry I didn't share with you, but just thinking about women and their role within sport and about the expectations that are often on us in terms of behaving in a certain way. It's certainly a conversation I hope to pick up with Kerenza again in the future. And I'll tell you more about my podcast plans at a later date. But for this one, I just wanted to reflect on something that I've noticed quite a lot in my conversations with women. And in terms of noticing the media coverage around the Olympics as well. And just there are some interesting differences, I think, that occur. And one of my current bugbears is around the idea of being grateful, because it's come up in quite a lot of conversations recently. It's this idea that we cannot express a negative emotion or a negative opinion or feeling angry or pissed off about something without then caveating it with, but of course, I'm very grateful for all of the opportunities and all of the everything that's good in my life. And the reason I want to bring this up is because actually, it can be a form of gaslighting in terms of that expectation that happens with all of us, but particularly seems to happen with women, that actually it's not acceptable for us to express ourselves in any form of negative or angry way, because actually under this all we should be agreeable and we should present ourselves in a way that is acceptable for a public face. And it made me reflect on how frustrating that must be, as in the nature of the Olympics, that if you are someone who has trained for a long time and worked very hard to get where to get to that place, and then do have a race or have an event where you don't perform as you hoped you would, or something happens, that actually we're expected to push that down, and you know that somehow that it's not okay to be able to go, actually, I'm really, really not happy. I'm really upset that that happened. And that is valid for me. Um, and it worries me that actually that is something that we continue to teach little girls, that actually the ultimate prize for a girl is to be good. It is to be seen by society as someone who is well behaved, who toes the line, who isn't difficult, who isn't challenging, who doesn't step outside or cross the boundaries, who isn't angry or aggressive or doesn't want things, isn't ambitious or competitive. And all of those emotions and feelings are part of who we are. And for athletes, obviously, even more so, they need to be competitive and driven to get where they are. But that at some level, actually being able to say to our children, to our daughters, as well as to our sons, it's okay to be competitive. It's okay to be disappointed that you didn't win. It's okay to want to come first. That doesn't mean you have to denigrate people who don't, or when you lose, that you go around complaining about everything or saying that somebody else's fault. But it does mean that we can express our anger and our disappointment without fear of somebody calling us out and say, well, you should just be grateful you had the opportunity at all. Yeah. So slightly different tone to some of my previous conversations, but I think it is important to recognize, I think that there is a wider conversation to be had around our expectations in this sort of framing. Um, and yeah, hopefully I'll continue to follow that thread at some point. But I really would love to know what you think. So please do reach out. You can find me on Instagram, Everyday Adventure Pod, or Resilience at Work. You can find me on LinkedIn, Nikki Bass. You can find me resiliencewrk.co.uk. That's my website. I would love to hear from you. So please do reach out and let me know what you think. And I will be back. So we're coming to the end of season 7. One more episode to go. And it will be with you very shortly. So keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, I look forward to speaking to you soon. Take care. Bye.